All right, good morning, everyone, here from Rosicrucian Park. I welcome you to the presentation. Today, we'll be looking at what I like to call the many dimensions of dew, and this is morning dew. And I want to talk about this because for some of our Rosicrucian exercises, it's a very important element. And so today, we'll look at it from its many different sides. So to prepare, we're going to do a visualization. So let's take a minute to get grounded. We're moving from presentation to presentation very quickly. So if you could sit like you usually sit when you're meditating and just go ahead and feel free to close your eyes. I have this beautiful image here of fresh dew on grass, so you can look at that or you can close your eyes and just take a deep breath. And we're right here at the cusp of the solstice. So we're going to take an early summer walk through the dew. So picture yourself. You're standing in the dew on a fresh early summer morning. You have your bare feet out in the moisture. And take a minute to smell the freshness and the cleanliness of the morning air. So now we're going to start just walking around on the grass while it's wet and feel the moisture and the solidity of the earth underneath your feet. Feel the moisture from the dew nourishing your body from the ground up. And feel the soil, feel the texture of the grass, and let your body and your weight sink into the earth. And feel your body become relaxed and grounded. Now take a deep breath and return to objective consciousness. And feel free to open your eyes. So now that we've had a morning experience with the dew, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining me on this journey through the dew. So we'll look this morning at how the condensation in the morning affects people, has affected people, and different belief systems, thought systems over periods of time and through different perspectives. So we'll look at ancient Egypt and see how the Egyptians thought about this phenomenon. Then we'll move through the centuries and we'll see from Hildegard of Bingen what she has to say about the dew. Hildegard has a lot to say about the dew. And then we'll look at it from the alchemical perspective and how it's used. And then we'll see how it's connected to Rosicrucian healing. And I think you might be very surprised at the role that dew plays across spiritual practices. So first, to give us a foundation, we'll look at what exactly is dew. So dew is created through a combination of weather factors. So during the day, as we know, the sun heats up the ground, and this causes air temperatures to rise. So you'll notice this if you're in a city where the ground is very populated with concrete and buildings, you get a lot more heat. If you're out in a grassy field, you're going to get less heat from the ground. And so the sun heats up the ground, causing the air temperature to rise. So in this example, let's say the outside temperature is 70 degrees. So at nighttime, the ground, of course, cools down. Now, there's a measurement called the dew point, and you might hear this if you watch a weather report. But the dew point is the temperature at which moisture starts to form in the air. So in this example, the dew point is 40 degrees. So what happens is then at nighttime, as the ground cools, the air right above the surface, above, say, for instance, above the grass cools. And when that reaches the temperature of the dew point, then the water condensation appears on the surfaces. So that's how dew arises. Now, if it's below freezing, then you would have frost instead of the dew. So we'll look at our first example here. So in Egypt, the concept of moisture and dry air were older than the cycle of the day and night. Now, the goddess here, Tefnut, she was the goddess responsible for moisture, dew, and the life-giving power of the Nile. She was a member of the Ennead, the nine primary gods, representing the fundamental forces of creation. So here we're immediately seeing dew as a fundamental force of creation. And the creator god Amun created Tefnut and her brother Shu, and they represented the opposites of moisture with Tefnut and dry air with Shu. And together they created the earth and sky, that is Geb and Nut. And between them, they created space for the universe to come into existence. And in this papyrus image, the god Shu, dry air, is holding up the sky goddess Nut. And you can see the earth god stretched out in the bottom in dark green. And these four gods created the cycle of day and night and dry and moist conditions. And Egypt relied on this cycle of renewal. And so Tefnut's moisture allows life to emerge, to sustain itself, and renew itself after the hardship of hot, harsh days. And together they brought the balance necessary for survival and well-being. So here in Egypt, dew was seen as a divine gift charged by the cosmos, a life-preserving force. It represented the power of the cosmic forces, and it was a gift from the night sky to allow for replenishment and to restore universal balance each day. So next, we'll go from the Egyptian desert to the Rhineland in Germany, a very different climate and a different environment. And here we'll look through the lens of Hildegard of Bingen, who was a Christian mystic in the 12th century. And she was a prophet, a theologian, a healer, a composer, and she had visions, many visionary experiences. And it was through these that she received many divine revelations about the meaning of Scripture. And in her visions, she saw the role of the feminine in the creation of the divine and earthly worlds. And she developed a concept that she called viriditas. I have it here on the top of the slide for you to see how it's spelled. So, and this was divine feminine's fertility that provided this greening life force of nature. And this caused life to grow and thrive. And she saw, in seeing this dew as a gift from the divine feminine, because it would grow overnight, it would bring life to earth and continue on this renewal cycle. And in the Rhineland, you can imagine it was very green and very lush. And so the dew played a very important part there every day. And Hildegard saw dew from both the physical and spiritual sides. On the physical side, it was informed by her astute observation of nature, and she was known for her gifted healing abilities. So the nuns would, there at her monasteries, would help to heal people who came to them that were sick. And so many of her healing remedies included using dew because of dew's healing qualities. And so the dew changed, Hildegard talked about, depending on the time of year and the month and from what type of plant that the dew was condensed on. And also, she would mix it with certain other plants to have different healing properties. And so the qualities of the dew also depended on its strength. Now, dew would be very strong when it was most prevalent, which is before dawn, because of the cooler temperatures. And then as the sun would come up, as the sun comes up, then the dew becomes weaker as it starts to evaporate and you have less of it. And she wrote a book called Physica. She wrote it between 1150 and 1158, again, 12th century. And this was her book of healing remedies, where she wrote about the healing qualities of all different elements of the natural world. So she wrote about stones, plants, trees, birds, fish, gems, and how those could all be used to sustain life and health for people. And in the book, she gives a number of examples of her remedies used from dew. So one of them was using, for instance, dew from straight grass and combining this with whole wheat flour to help with particular eye issues. And then she talked about how some other eye issues could be addressed better with the dew of the mallow plant. And then in terms of fruits growing, she talked about how apples ripened primarily during the cycle of the strong dew, which was produced, as we said before, right before daybreak. And then, so raw apples would be good for healthy people since they're ripened by the strong dew, but they might be too strong for people that have a weak constitution. And to compare this with pears, for instance, she talks about eating raw pear and how that can make people sick if they have a weak constitution as well. And that's because they grow when the dew's power is weak. So, for instance, she suggests eating cooked pears and not raw pears. And other foods that are sensitive to the dew are onion, garlic, kale, cabbage, and red cabbage. And these all respond to different phases of the dew throughout the courses of the night and day. When we look on the spiritual side, Hildegard's views on dew were informed by her visions. And her visions, she said, came from what she called the living light, where she would feel this sense of calm and this amazing sensation. And she would start to see images. And so she wrote about her visions in the first volume. She had three total volumes, but her first volume was called Scivias. And the image you see here is from that volume. And so here in this book, in her vision, she explored the creation story from the book of Genesis. And so this vision details a story about Adam and the dew. And here in this image, you see the orange circle with the blue circle in the middle, and then you see the flower right next to it. Well, that big orange circle and blue circle, that represents in her vision the divine force. And the divine force is producing the gift of this flower that you see right there. And the flower represents the dew she had. When she had a vision, she would also write about it. And so in her writings about the vision, she talked about how the flower and the dew were this gift from the divine to Adam. And so the figure you see here sniffing the flower is Adam. And in the vision, Adam sniffed the flower and then walked away. He ignores this divine gift. And so in Hildegard's cosmology, Adam's refusal of this divine gift of the flower and the dew and the bounty of the divine causes the fall of humanity. So remember seeing this white flower here holding the dew, because here Hildegard continues to use this reference of the flower that Adam rejected with the image of the white lily that we typically see in representations of the Annunciation. And this is a 19th century painting of the scene of the Annunciation by Auguste Pinchot. And the Annunciation is where the Archangel Gabriel comes to the Virgin Mary with news that she will conceive and give birth to Christ. And Mary accepts this mission. So Hildegard tells us that Adam's fateful error, causing the fall of humanity, was rectified by the Virgin Mary because Mary accepts the gift of the flower, of the dew, of the divine. So Hildegard sees dew as this metaphor for the birth of Christ. And we can see this also as the coming of a divine force into the world, bridging heaven and earth. And in fact, in a letter to a bishop, Hildegard was a very prolific letter writer. She gave advice to lay people and people all throughout Europe, church officials, people would write to her. And in giving advice to a particular bishop, she told him to proceed with his mission because he was, quote unquote, covered with the dew of the night. And that's a quote from the Song of Songs from the Hebrew Bible. But here she's also seeing dew as this armor that rejuvenates the soul with cosmic power, with the power of the divine. Now, Hildegard was in the 12th century. So moving along, a few centuries later, we come to the alchemist and how they talk about the dew and incorporate it into their work. And for alchemists, dew is seen as a prima materia for their alchemical work. So it's central, it's what is called the first matter and is a beginning basis for many of the alchemical operations to follow. And so this image that you see here is from a book called the Mutus Liber, and that means silent book. And this book consisted only of illustrated plates, didn't have any text. And it laid out the process for alchemists of working with the dew to create the elixir of long life. And these operations throughout the book were always performed by a man and woman together. And this was also a metaphor for coming together of oneself, the different parts of oneself, the polarities, for self-realization and the integration of oneself with the divine. And in this first image we see from the book, you see this ladder here, and you see these angels on the ladder with the trumpets. And the angels are coming down from heaven and they're blowing the trumpet right above the alchemist to wake the alchemist up. And they give him a reference here from the Hebrew Bible here to guide him. And this is, again, we come back to Genesis and the creation story. And they have a quote from Genesis about dew in the creation story. And from Genesis chapter 27, verse 28, I have it here. So God give thee of the dew of heaven and of the fat places of the earth, and plenty of corn and wine. And so this is seen as a divine decree that dew, as a gift from heaven, is part of humanity's birthright to be used for survival and thriving. And so this alchemist has this divine command to begin working with the dew. And a few years ago, I was going through the Rosicrucian library here, and I happened to run across this book called Gold of a Thousand Mornings. And it was written in 1969 by a 20th century alchemist named Armand Barbeau. And he used the book, the Mutus Liber, as a basis for creating an elixir of life himself. And so in the book, he talks about the physical part of the work and the spiritual part of the work. And in terms of the physical part of the work, he looked at working with the dew. He went over the different alchemical processes that he used to refine and refine the dew until the elixir was complete. And so here in the images I have up here, he started to plan the dew. So he used the astrological chart for the location and the time that he was looking at for collecting the dew. So he made sure he had the stars aligned and the planets aligned for what he wanted to do, for the qualities of the dew that he wanted. And then he looked at collecting the dew. So the next image over here on the top right side, he's collecting the dew and he has put together all this canvas and he's dragging the canvas over a field of wheat. And so he would have a length of about 50 meters, which is about half the length of a football field, a tiny bit more. And he would drag this over this length back and forth, and that would yield a liter of the dew. And he would do this on spring mornings before the sun rose. And then the soaked canvases would be wrung out so that he could go back and get more dew and begin working with the dew. And so the image on the bottom left here, he's with a friend. They've just collected it. So they're wringing out the dew in a container. And there's an exact picture of this happening in the Mutas Liber book as well, except it's with the man and the wife. And then next to that, the next photo over shows right there, he's with his wife. And this is at the end of the process where he has created what he called potable gold, his elixir. And so he was working and working and working this process. And it took him 12 years of refining the dew. And he also used some tree sap and soil and some powdered gold, but he worked with these substances and went back and refined, and then went through the different stages that we saw previously in Leo's presentation. And at the end of this, and again, it took him 12 years, but he was able to produce this elixir that he called potable gold, which means drinkable gold. And in the book, on the more spiritual part of the side of the work, he talked about who you have to become to undertake the work and who you become while you are undertaking the work. And I thought this part was also very striking about the book. He talked about how the process of working with the dew was also this process of refining oneself. And this was also to ensure that he was working correctly with the dew. So he wanted to make sure that he did it with his wife. And they're again representing these polarities and trying to be as faithful to what was in this Mutas Liber book as possible. So he, in collecting all the dew, he tried to follow instructions as much as possible. And so here he talks a bit about what he went through while he was going through this process. So he says, there is a preparation of the would-be adept himself. So that he may work under the best conditions, he has to observe very strict rules of purity and hygiene. He has to know how to avoid negative forces and how to accumulate an intensity of psychic energy. He has to observe the necessary isolation and be, as it were, in a state of grace. To reach this high spiritual level, interior prayer is essential. The days preceding acquisition, therefore, are marked by ceremonies whose secret the student guards jealously, so that no one may come and defile the place or divert the energy source. For the same reason, that part of the ground from which the matter will be taken is itself prepared, encircled and isolated from outside currents. The seeker and his matter evolve together. So I thought this was a beautiful way that he really brought together the spiritual part of the process and who you have to become to undertake this, as well as working through all of the steps over and over and all the iteration it took to be able to get his potable gold. So, how do we use this divine gift? Well, we're very fortunate to have Rosicrucian exercises that bring all these principles together for us in a practical and simple way. So, Rosicrucian healing techniques involve using specific breathing patterns and placing focus on specific areas of the body that may need healing. And the goal is to restore harmony to our systems. And like the alchemist stressed, the spiritual preparation before engaging in work is very important. And the same is true for Rosicrucian healing. To perform healing exercises to the best of our ability for ourselves or others, we need to prepare ourselves. And we perform certain exercises to balance the negative and positive electrical polarity of our bodies to do this. So there are a number of exercises that involve standing and walking barefoot in the dew. And this does a number of things for us. So the moisture from the droplets helps to increase the conductivity of the energy from the earth to our body. And it also helps to bring balance. So we know that dew is associated with polarity by now and balance. And before, we saw it connected to the polarities of air and water, dry air, moist air, night and day, moon and the sun, female and male. And here we're balancing the positive and negative polarities within our own bodies. And these need to be balanced for us to maintain health. So it enhances and increases our body's ability to maintain this balance. And the dew from the condensation of the polarities of Earth and air, it also brings together Earth's negative electromagnetism and the atmosphere's positive electromagnetism. And also in doing this, the dew helps to increase the intensity of our polarities. So it helps us to build up energy. So our exercises help us do that as well. And then the dew adds that extra bit to help us do that as much as possible. And the dew has a very high vibratory frequency, and this helps to imbue us with cosmic essence and more vital life force, or chi, if you've heard of that. And it also allows us, I believe, to store more vital life force to help us maintain high states of health and vitality. And this divine gift embodies, and we've seen this in previous slides, the elements of earth, air, fire, and water all together, connecting us all the way from the material world to the divine. And we help form that conduit as we stand there and take in the dew. And this could even have a specific healing intention when you're standing in the dew or walking in the dew. And you can incorporate vowel sounds while performing this. And you can work with the dew to magnify the intention and results of what you're trying to accomplish. And so you may even want to experiment with different types of dew, walking through different types of dew, strong dew, weak dew, different grasses, and sometimes in different times of the year. Spring and summer are more recommended because the dew evaporates faster during the day. And we benefit from the variety of the power of the natural world when we vary the dew that we like to work with. And so we're literally soaking up this divine gift. And also taking it in through our feet is a symbolic act of ascension and integration. And so we can feel the essence of the dew moving up through our body and helping us to integrate ourselves with the cosmic and natural world forces. So, here on the last slide here, I wanted to talk about some deeper symbolism with the words. So, the word ros, R-O-S, is Latin actually for dew. And crucis, we're used to that being Latin for the cross or crux. And it's also the root of the syllable crucible. And of course, a crucible is used in alchemical work, but it's also a metaphor of a severe test that comes to us. And so this is really interesting because it gives us another meaning of the Rosicrucian work that we do. And when we go back to the Egyptian concept of dew being associated with this cycle of rejuvenation after a period of difficulty, and similar to what the alchemist says, where the alchemists are constantly reworking and purifying the elixir and back and forth, we have this case here where we work with this cycle of renewal and then we're tested and renewal and then we're tested and we continue to refine and refine and we're able to come to better decisions when we come to that crossroads. And so I think ultimately, like looked at concepts behind the dew and why it's been so meaningful to people across the eons. And while the dew helps us to align ourselves with the cosmic, the dew ultimately becomes a metaphor for the all this work that we're constantly doing as Rosicrucians. And so, as one of the main takeaways, I would say that as we consistently work with our practice and perform our exercises and work the teachings, we become better equipped, again, to make better decisions and refine our approaches over time and refine who we are becoming. And our teachings and practices are always there to help us renew ourselves. It's always a foundation like the dew that we can come back to. And this cycle of rejuvenation and refinement, this dew and crucible cycle, helps to guide us toward the rose quartz state to which we aspire. So, thank you, everybody, for joining me for the presentation.